This is the Sabbath School lesson for the first quarter, 2022.
Welcome to Lesson 9, Jesus the Perfect Sacrifice, ready for teaching on February 26. It's from the series In These Last Days, the Message of Hebrews. The author is Dr. Felix Cortes, who is Associate Professor of New Testament Literature in the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University. And I'm your reader for today, Dr. Percy Harrold. Friday, February 25. Professor Jerry Moscala has explained the nature of this pre-Advent judgment. God, he writes, Toward a Biblical Theology of God's Judgment, a celebration of the cross in 7 phases of divine universal judgment, published in the Journal of the Adventist Theological Society in spring 2004, page 155, we read, God is not there in order to display my sins like in a shop window. He will, on the contrary, point first of all to his amazing, transforming, powerful grace, and in front of the whole universe, he, as the true witness of my entire life, will explain my attitude toward God, my inner motives, my thinking, my deeds, my orientation and direction of life. He will demonstrate it all. Jesus will testify that I made many mistakes, that I transgressed his holy law, but also that I repented, asked for forgiveness, and was changed by his grace. He will proclaim, my blood is sufficient for the sinner Moscala. His orientation of life is on me. His attitude toward me and other people is warm and unselfish. He is trustworthy. He is my good and faithful servant. End of quote. And then from the book The Desire of Ages, pages 19 and 20, both the redeemed and the unfallen beings will find in the cross of Christ their science and their song. It will be seen that the glory shining in the face of Jesus is the glory of self-sacrificing love. In the light from Calvary, it will be seen that the law of self-renouncing love is the law of life for earth and heaven. That the love which seeketh not her own has its source in the heart of God, and that in the meek and lowly one is manifested the character of him who dwelleth in the light, which no man can approach to. End of quote. And that brings us to our 2 discussion questions for this week. 1. Human beings have always had the tendency to offer different kinds of sacrifices to God as an exchange for forgiveness of salvation. Some offer God heroic acts of penance, long journeys, etc. Others offer a life of service or acts of self-deprivation, etc. How should these acts be considered in the light of Jesus' sacrifice and the assertion of Scripture that the cross has put an end to all sacrifices, as we read in Daniel 9:27 and Hebrews 10, verse 18? First of all, Daniel 9:27, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. And Hebrews 10:18, now where there is remission of these, there is no longer an offering of sin. And question 2, at the same time, what is the role of sacrifice in the life of the believer? What did Jesus mean when he said that we need to take our cross and follow him? In Matthew 16 and verse 24, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Or the Apostle Paul when he said that we should offer our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, in Romans 12:1. What is the relationship between the instructions of Jesus in Matthew and Paul in Romans? And Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 13, verses 15 and 16. Therefore, by him let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to God, that is, the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But do not forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. Inside Story. Our mission story this week is titled Gospel Calling, and it's by Andrew McChesney. 𝐃𝐎𝐒, the breadwinner of his family, fell ill in rural Laos. His legs became so heavy that he could not walk. He was confined to his house for 3 months. With no money to see a doctor, 𝐃𝐿, not his real name, resorted to all sorts of herbal medicine and traditional healers, including the shaman or spirit doctor in his village. Nothing helped. Finally, seeing his desperation, someone told him about a Seventh-day Adventist pastor who had helped many people by cell phone. The man called up Pastor �𝐍𝐎𝐓 𝐿, whose picture appears at the bottom of the page, and asked for help. Now, it wasn't simply a phone call. Phone calls were something of a luxury, costing 700 Laotian kips, that's 8 US cents per minute. At the time, a third of the population was living on less than US $1.25 a day, and nearly two-thirds were living on less than $2 a day. The ill man begged Pastor 𝐍𝐎𝐓 to heal him. "I am nobody," the pastor replied. "I cannot heal you, but my God, who is called Jesus, can heal you if it is his will. All we have to do is ask him." 𝐃𝐿 requested prayer, and the pastor prayed for him over the phone. The next day, the pastor called the man to offer prayer for him again. 𝐃𝐿 was so excited. "I can walk," he explained. Although his legs were weak, he was able to walk for the first time in 3 months. He had already gone out to work on his farm. "Your God is so powerful," he said. "How can I worship your God who is called Jesus?" The pastor told him that he could and should worship Jesus all the time, and added that Jesus had set aside a special day for worship, the seventh-day Sabbath. The man agreed to stop work on Sabbath to worship Jesus. Seeing that he lived far from a church, he asked the pastor to help him worship on Sabbaths. That meant that the pastor would have to call every Sabbath, but he didn't mind. If Jesus could provide 𝐃𝐿 with healing, he also would provide the means to pay for the calls. Thank you for your Sabbath School mission offerings that help spread the gospel to people in Laos and other countries of the Southern Asia-Pacific Division, which will receive this quarter's 13th Sabbath offering. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.